Hi everybody, and welcome back to the brush.
I'm Edgar.
And I'm Paul.
And you're joining us for the model making and miniature painting podcast that we release once a month. If you would like to follow along with some of the slightly nicer images of what we're talking about today, we will have an Instagram post on the Back to the Brush Instagram where we have the top 10 relevant images, and they're easier to see there than it is kind of in the YouTube video.
Last month we briefly brushed over, that's a good pun. We briefly brushed over using Games Workshop's contrast paints,
yep,
but not for what they intended. So one of my friends and viewers contacted us, and we're going to talk about some bits and bobs, show some examples with that.
We're also going to be talking about some tie-in books for the models that we are painting and making, whether that being the book comes first and the model is made of a character, or whether the models comes first and then the books are written about them.
But first, we're going to show a couple of models that we've painted this month, starting with Ed, because he's done way more than me this month.
I do have a quite eclectic selection of models that I have painted, and I will start off with my Defcopter. I recently did a video of an Orc war bike, and I found a painting technique that I thought kind of worked quite well, and I've recreated it here because, well, science is repeatable after all. We may as well have another go. So the way that I've done most of the paintwork on this, the actual body of the bike, is black primer, a metallic dry brush, and there's a mix of gold and silver and all sorts of different metallics. It's not a consistent metallic over the whole thing. But then I've glazed some red over the whole, cool. All of the metalwork that's going to be painted red. And because it's glazed, you actually can see the metallic shining through, so it looks like a metallic red. And of course I've done some weathering details, some scratches and stuff over the top, some edge highlighting in just a pure metallic, but the vast majority of that is the glazed red over metal.
I look forward to seeing that one in person.
Yes, well, we'll have to bring you down here sometime, shan't we? I also have, as you would probably expect, a whole bunch of Tanith First and Only models. I have actually 6 models that are related to the Tanith First and Only, including one of the ones that I've done some clay milliput sculpting for a cloak.
Yep.
I've got some with Victoria Miniatures parts, which I have used some of before. But these are the female officers that Victoria Models sells. And even though I think they're a really good option for the Tanith First and Only if you're making models, a lot of people go to Victoria Miniatures and they don't get the female officer. And it's weird for me. So I'm making a video specifically about this to say, hey, like, you missed it. You're kind of ignoring one really cool thing and just buying the stuff that's on the shelf next to it, like the digital shelf next to it. And of course, the most popular thing I've done this month, the Ghostly Gaunt's Ghost, which is made from a chain rasp. I switched over the sword for something close to a Tanith war knife and gave him a las gun as well. It was a pretty simple conversion. It's mainly just I painted the camouflage on the hood.
And seeing as it's like 99% Games Workshop stuff, it's actually tabletop legal.
It's completely... Oh, actually, no, you're right. The blade is from Frostgrave. So technically that's a different company's product. But everything else is Games Workshop. And yeah, this is... I mean, like my Victoria Miniatures ones, that's a 100% not Games Workshop model. This is definitely legitimate. And... it's got a las gun, so it's representative of a trooper with a las gun. Therefore, that's going in my army. But there's also a little bit of a painting competition that I saw recently. and that is on Eons of Battle YouTube channel. They have a Discord, and they ran a painting competition for some easy build Cadians. Do you know the push fit ones?
Yes, yeah.
Now, I don't have the push fit ones, but they did say that if you build a standard multi-part Cadian, as long as you get like close enough to the push fit ones in terms of how it looks, like you can't use a flamer or melter gun or something like that.
You need to have the standard equipment, and
so that's what
roughly
I've
the same
done.
pose.
I have not painted this as the Tanith First and Only as you would expect, but rather this is from the Volpone Blue Bloods, which are from the Tanith First and Only books. They're one of the regiments of Imperial Guard that Dan Abnett created, but they are not the Tanith themselves. Yeah, and they've got purple uniform and blue armor, and I copied, as I'll mention later on, I copied or I took inspiration from the cover of a book that's coming from Games Workshop. As part of that same video, and as a little bit of a joke, given that I made a joke model with the ghost, I may as well make another one. There is some discussion about how Volpone is supposed to be pronounced. The vast majority of people say that Volpone is the appropriate pronunciation. It is, was it Vector, Oscar, Lima, Papa, Oscar, November, Echo. So it's the same spelling as bone, phone, scone, so on and so forth. You would expect that to be pronounced Volpone, except in the audiobooks for the Gaunt's Ghost series, it's pronounced Volponi. And that's really
French
weird.
Or Italian sounding?
There's some theories going around, and it might just be that the person doing the reading hasn't necessarily thought about it, or it's possible that the author Dan Abnett actually said, no, this is the correct way to pronounce it, because I've heard that claim gone around again. But if this is a Volpone, then what's a Volponi? I have, of course, painted.
It's his mount.
It's way out of scale. It is absolutely. It's essentially a horse. I have painted a Volponi, and a lot of the colours are very similar. I tried to do the highlighting with a fur texture. It was actually a lot of fun painting this because there's no detail in the sculpt.
In the mould, yeah.
So all of the fur is essentially just flat, smooth surfaces, and you can go over it however you like. And so I was trying to paint in, like I would mix up a new, brighter version of the purple, and I would paint in the stripes of the fur where the highlight should be. And technique I've never used before, but it came out all right. It's very stripy. I don't think I've done the stripes small enough, or perhaps long enough, and they might be too small. But regardless, there is my my Volponi. And before I finish, as I've just talked for a massive chunk there, would you like to show off the complete building that you were working on last month?
Okay, so last month I was working on this building, which is a TT Combat model, which I've slightly converted to match the Fallout sort of aesthetic. So I've not put the petrol pumps in. Basically, this kit is set up to be a company called Dinogas, which is just made up by TT Combat so as to not infringe on any copyright owned.
Just a generic name. Yeah, that makes sense.
So it had like a cool dinosaur logo and stuff like that for the canopy. Would you say it was a canopy? Yeah.
Pavilion?
So I've dropped all that off because obviously I want to make it match a Fallout game. But there's all branding. So in here I've put up some posters from the game. So one's like the Helios one, which is quite a big one, and I've put some little posters up for like shows that were on at the casinos.
Is this
like
stuff
really
that was going on when, like in the 1950s, when the nukes fell, or is this?
Yeah, 2077. Yeah.
During the wasteland.
So yeah, before.
So
in the game, someone on the wiki's pulled all these graphics from the game. What?
The before times.
The before times. The never, never.
1,000-yard stare. The before time. Carry on.
Like that
Carry on.
meme of the dog. Yeah. So I've got some posters that are from the existing game. They're supposed to look really aged already. So I laser printed those, and then I went over them with a brown wash, and then PVA'd them down to stop them from curling, and just stuck those over it to make it look like they've just been plastered up. I'm not entirely sure how I'm going to handle it's hard to see in the bit, but it's sort of engraved into the floor. So I'm thinking probably some kind of mats or something, just because it's a car garage. So
one of the mats that we were talking about on a previous episode, print one of those up and glue it down.
Yeah, I did do, but I kind of think like that'd be a bit strange in a car garage.
Well, is it still a car garage?
Because it's got. Yes, yeah, it's still a car garage.
Right. So maybe just. I don't know what they're called, but there's a rubber mat that has
the ones I'm thinking of, that jigsaw together.
Yeah. So that if you have an oil spill or something, you're still like the oil will sit in the holes and you're still walking on the rubber. That's I've got the type of thing.
So bits I've done like the tool cabinet. So like that, and then this is what the game calls a diagnostic cart. I don't really know, but I know what it looks like in the game. I made a safe with a little blowtorch on the top to sort of represent like the guys trying to get in it. A dirty mattress I resin printed to go on the floor, so I can make up those little diorama. So that particular building in the game, the garage part's open and there's a load of craft benches, but the actual petrol station is all boarded up. So I've got free reign on what I want to do on the inside. So it's a campfire. So this is for
campfire.
Frostgrave, I think. But yes, I've made that up. So I'm not 100% what I'm going to do with it yet, but I've printed up loads of little bits and bobs and cups and glasses, and I'll just glue them down out how I feel. I think when
Greebles, yes,
Greebles, and lots and lots and lots and lots of tyre piles from.
There's always piles of tyres. Is there piles and piles of tyres around garages? Because whenever I go to a garage, there's never a pile of tyres out front. To be fair, I have seen. They're probably out back. I have seen that there is a place near me that is specifically a tyre replacement shop. That's all they do is replace tyres. And no, they don't replace motorcycle tyres. Useless. But they actually do have just a wall of tyres in front. But they're all the used tyres. Yeah. And I don't know how they deal with it, whether that's something that they get regularly picked up or whether that's a permanent fixture.
I'm going to go out on a limb and guess that if they left piles of tyres outside the shop, someone would go along and set fire to it.
Well, that pile of tyres has been there for a couple of decades, at least.
Perhaps it's just by me then, eh?
So, it's not exactly in the nicest part of town, and my town isn't exactly the nicest town. There are worse places to live. Like where you are.
So, in addition to that, I picked up some of the new RoboBrain models. In fact, let me get them out of the box under the table. So they've just released a new expansion pack for the game. So there's a lot of the Fallout New Vegas style stuff, which is cool. Because that's the model I'm working around is New Vegas, and they're going to be doing a competition next week for terrain for Fallout New Vegas on their Facebook group. So
that is something that you have to win then.
So I mean,
with your
there is some stiff competition, but I've got a lot more.
Yeah, there's a lot. You win the quantity prize.
Yeah. So anyway, so these
I guarantee you, there's someone out there who's got more than you, because there always is.
I was actually quite pleased to see someone on the forum printed the dino, the actual dinosaur that I printed.
Yeah.
Someone printed that the other week on the forum and posted pictures of it. I was like, oh, that's really cool.
Interestingly, and I think you've seen this already, I have seen someone made a new version of that, not based on the game files.
Yes, you shared it with me.
A completely from scratch build of that kind of dinosaur with a sign and everything, with the purpose of that being it can be 3D printed. So
yeah. I mean,
doesn't
after
have
you
gaps,
sent
it
it
doesn't
me,
have like separate bits or anything like that.
no, after you sent me that, the guy who designed it posted it in the actual. He posted it
Oh, fair
on
enough.
one of the Warhammer 3D print groups that I'm in, and I sent him a link and said I'll come over to the Fallout one because that's what you aimed it for. So he came over and.
Oh yeah, cool. Okay, so you've probably spoken to him more. I mentioned that you'd printed the kind of game file, slightly fixed up version, but that is such a nice. It's like if you'd have been doing it now rather than then, you'd probably go for that version, I expect, because it's so much easier to print.
So in that phase, they also released some of the models for the previous game, which, looking at the bottom of the bases, they're designed a long time ago and never released, so I don't know. So we've got these. Now, these are just based. I have not painted them solid silver. But these are Robo Brains. But there's two of them. And obviously they're multi-pose as far as you can adjust the arms, but that's all you've got. So, and they both have the same base, which to me is a bit rubbish. When it's a 2-model set, you could have done a bit of variation on the bases.
Can you at least put the base the other way around?
Yeah, you can put the base anywhere around you want.
Well, there you go. That's enough variation. If there's two of them and they're standing at different angles, then you can kind of hide the fact that it's the same base.
So last month, I briefly showed these little leafy things that I got.
Yes,
from the Little Leaf Company. So
these are real leaves of a plant that just makes tiny leaves.
They
right?
look tiny leaves, yeah. So the first one of the bases, I stuck a bit of grass on it. I managed to get some dead grass tufts from AliExpress, and then the second one, I did the leaves. And I really love these.
Yeah, they fit the scale really nicely.
So
I haven't done any of my static grass. I built one of those kind of janky static grass applicators that are always pop up. I used it once and it was awful, and I haven't really gone back to work out how to use it properly. So I've got a bag of static grass that I need to use up somehow.
I think the last time I even thought about static grass was when I was at your house and we watched the video from Luke.
Oh yeah, Luke.
What's his company
How
name?
do, guys? It's Luke.
Yeah, so he reviewed all
Geek
different
Gaming
static
Scenics?
grass.
No, that's something up. I can't remember what his company name is. He says it every other second of his videos. Yeah.
Anyway, so he did a review and he went through obviously the dead cheap ones, which were no good. They didn't appear to do anything static wise. They were just an applicator, really.
Yeah.
And then obviously the really expensive ones. But
I noticed that he didn't even include the homemade one, and I would rate the one that I've made as being worse than the worst one in that video. So it kind of is an even inline scale of. I don't want to spend 250 quid on that amazing one that works brilliantly, though.
Yeah, it was an interesting video. It's just, I suppose, because I'm either painting Fallout stuff where there ain't no grass, because everything's dead.
There could be some amount of grass.
I'm painting Warhammer stuff, and I tend to do sort of more deserty, rocky kind of stuff. Like I suppose one of the Warhammer models I was painting this month. That's all like concrete and bits of dirt and stuff. Now this is a pre-molded base, so you obviously got a lot of option, but
yeah, it's easier when it's a pre-molded base.
These are from the blind bags.
Oh, the Terminators, Space Marines.
Yeah, what was it called?
Beaky blind bags.
Space Marine Heroes.
Sure.
Yeah. So I got given a couple of those.
For my Tanith First and Only, I'm doing a muddy, not necessarily forest base, but a very muddy base. And so having grass tufts particularly if I can use the static grass to make patches of grass for this. That's my goal, is to be able to do just for basing. It's not really for terrain. Although that long-term project that I've definitely looked at since the last 6 months that we have for the channel, the graveyard, I want to do some static grass on that.
Yeah. Well, we have a new entry, of course, this month into this competition because Foxy Mitts, and member of Autorelaxers, tells us that she's going to knit an entire graveyard set faster than what it takes me and Ed to actually paint up and finish ours. So, well, it'll be a 3-way competition.
Oh dear. Oh dear, oh dear. I've actually taken the decision that I've put aside the graveyard temporarily until the Stomper is done, because that's the Back to the Brush Stomper. I will finish the Stomper. I'm doing it bit by bit, and I have done some more this month, as I'll mention in a moment. But it will come to the point where the Stomper's done. I will then do the graveyard.
Yep.
Talking about why that is, I will mention some other models that I have painted, and that would be my zombies.
Zombie boys.
So a lot of these are, well, I mean, all of these are taken from Thingiverse. There is a lot of different designers involved. I will try to link them all in the description. Obviously, the digital sculptors deserve the credit, even if they've put their stuff up for free. But I won't be able to find them all because there's a lot of them. I'll do my best. These were all printed when I was getting used to doing 3D printing with a resin printer, but also the supports in Chitterbox. And all of these models have lumps and bumps where the supports have fallen off. Quite a few of them have missing feet because, like, even if you print it at an angle, if the bottom fails and the feet crack off when you try and take them off of the supports, that was a common thing. I think I fixed that simply by warming up the resin. Just a bowl of hot water, put the resin in, let it warm up. Yeah, that was suggested to me. Actually, that was suggested by a few people, including Alice Coatduck, to say, just like, what temperature is the resin at? Well, warm it up. And because once it hits a certain point, like as the printer's running, the ultraviolet bulbs bring it up to temperature. But
I mean, it's really warm if you've ever feel it after a long print job.
But it doesn't start at that temperature. It starts much colder. But if you warm up the resin in advance, you can put the resin in warm, start the print pretty much straight away, and it'll maintain that temperature rather than trying to get to it.
Okay, that's interesting.
But because these are all printed pretty badly and look awful, I didn't really care about painting them well. But I still wanted to paint them. And so I've been testing out my airbrush with this. And the first thing was just, I want to airbrush the entire lot brown. Can I do a base coat? Because that's like the first thing that people think of when they're getting into airbrushing is, can I do a base coat? It's quicker. It's quicker to do a base coat with an airbrush than it is with a rattle can.
I think it's more cost effective as well.
Yeah. Well, it turns out, and I'll spoil my video for this, that not necessarily with a rattle can, which is much, much quicker but more expensive, but actually doing a base layer with a brush, with a physical brush, bristle brush. How long would it take you to do a base coat, just the entire model, paint it brown with a bristle brush?
Less than a minute.
Few minutes per model, so 10 models would be 20-30 minutes.
Yeah,
roughly. I timed myself from setting up the paint, putting it into the airbrush, spraying it, and cleaning the airbrush, because that is the complete set. You can't just dump the airbrush down and say, right, time's up, because next time you come, the paintbrush is clogged up.
Nightmare of cleaning job. Yeah.
So you have to include the time it takes to clean the airbrush. The painting step, like setting up the paint, spraying it, and wiping out the airbrush, took about 10 minutes. So that's a lot faster than using the brushes, which would be 25-ish minutes. But then to clean the airbrush, that took another 15 minutes. So the total time is 25 minutes, or about the same. I tried it again with the green, and I was much more careful because I just wanted to hit the skin. Mm-hmm. And I started with a dark green because, zombie skin, dark green, whatever. And the timing there was about the same. It was about 10 minutes of paint time. I was painting less stuff because I was just painting the skin, but I was being more careful because I was trying to hit just the skin and not overspray too much. But then I had the idea, I've got all this green, so I picked out a bunch of my Gretchen from my pile of opportunity.
Oh, and sprayed them at the same time.
I've still got some green in the airbrush. I'd do those as well. And then I realised my stomper, the Back to the Brush stomper, I painted a bunch of the armour panels on it green, but I hadn't completed the job. And some of them kind of, like, you know, when you do one layer and it's all streaky and nasty. So I wanted to go over it again. So I took the airbrush, again, it's still got green in it, and I emptied out the airbrush on the stomper. I just kept going until the airbrush ran out. And then I cleaned the airbrush. And that whole process took about 30 minutes.
Yeah. So it's just having all your ducks lined up ready to go, basically, to be time effective.
If you're doing airbrushing on a small number of models and you're just doing one coat and then cleaning the airbrush and putting it away, it's probably about the same time, or you're not saving much in terms of time versus using a bristle brush. However, doing this with the airbrush with lots of models, or if you're like, if I did the brown, wiped out the cup and then put the green and went straight into the green, I wouldn't have to clean it. I could just run it maybe with some water just to blast out the last of the brown, mix in the green and carry on. You don't need to really clean it for that. So that's where the time savings are. So it is all about workflow and like you say, ducks in a row sort of thing. I still have a lot to learn when it comes to airbrushing. These are this is the first time I've done a batch paint with airbrushing. And I think I've only done, last month I showed the Sister of Tellurium, which we don't have to edit in because I remembered the name this time. But the Sister of Tellurium was done, was just base coated with the airbrush as well. My last model that I will show off is one of the Zona Secrets of Chernobyl models. This is the Loner. And he's got an AK strapped to his chest and he's got a revolver in his hands. And the character in the game starts with no firearms at all.
Would be boring though, wouldn't it? If he didn't have anything. He's just walking around going, oh, I hope nothing comes to me.
Gee whiz, I hope nothing bad happens to me, you know, in the radioactive zone that is Zona. I'm actually really enjoying this series. Playing the game and then paint. In terms of what I do is I play the game and then like the next day I'll paint the model.
Yeah, I think it gives you a bit of inspiration because you've developed a story in your head for that character.
And it's kind of strange because I don't know how to paint in an experience, but it's still good to have it in your head, like while you're painting.
I think it's more, it gives you something to you imagine aspects about him. It's like this model which we showed. I had a very distinct and vivid image in my head of this character and how I want her to look. You know, like I want her dress to be blue and stuff like that, which I wouldn't have generated if I hadn't have role played that character first.
I almost I didn't make any decisions about the colour. I painted his jacket blue. I've no idea why. I think in the artwork, the official artwork, his jacket is blue, but I didn't paint it blue because of that. I think it's just luck that I chose the same colour. Maybe there's some subconscious stuff going on.
A lot of stuff with that, where if there's nothing official that I need to follow, I really just go with the colour that it is in my imagination.
Yeah. Even though I'm trying to do 2 Zona videos a month, I've only done 1 this month. So either I'm going to have to space them out a bit more, or I'm going to have to do 3 to catch up next month. I've got enough time to get one out for at the time of recording. It'll be next week.
Just print another model that kind of fits. Paint that.
Well, no, I've got the models. I've got 7 left.
Oh, okay.
There's 10 models. There's 10 models in the box. I've painted. This is the 3rd one that I've done, and there's 7 left. So I just need to play the game. Oh no! What a chore! I get to play a game that I enjoy playing. I really want to play it with 3 or 4 players, because the game board, the map, it's got a 1 and 2 player side, and then it's got a 3 and 4 player side. And when we played, obviously that's still the 1 and 2 player side, and all of my games have been single player. I want to play it with 3 or 4 people just so I can turn the thing over and play the other side. From what I've seen, there's not a lot of differences between the 2 sides. I think the main difference is that on the 1 and 2 player side, there is some blocked borders, so that you have to go around, so that your routes can take a bit longer. Whereas on the other side, every border is crossable directly. I think there might be some other changes. I haven't even looked.
There's a few blocks on the 2 player side, because I can remember them from when we played. I blocked you in when we played, because there was a solid wall to the rear, the bottom of it, south of your character, and I dropped a monster in from one of the event cards, and I got to choose where to deploy it, and I deployed it basically to your west to make you go back the way you came, just to slow you down.
Yeah, just stopping me from moving. I think if that was like the last turn, wasn't it? Or the last few turns.
It was quite near the end,
Yeah, I think if I'd have had a little longer, I probably would have just tried to fight the monster anyway, or at least try and fight past it. That's something I've learned actually with the loner, is sometimes you don't necessarily have to defeat the encounters that you have in the game. Sometimes you just have to pass the first step, the awareness test, and then that's it. I'm done. I'm going to move on.
Bolt.
There's some of the more dangerous cards in there that I checked with the dice and seeing if I roll 3 pluses and also use all of my equipment, I still can't win. There's no possible way mathematically for me to win, so I'm just going to not. I'm just going to carry on, leave it there.
Run away. So, last month we did that little bit of a challenge with the non-metallic metals.
Non-metallic metal.
So, I returned to my models and did a bit more. I'm still not 100% with them, but I'm happy with them as far as models go.
That does look quite a bit better than it did last month. I think last month you had the lighting placed pretty good, but now you've actually got the transitions working as well. It's kind of odd doing non-metallic metal, because it's sort of conceptually nowhere near as hard as people think it is, but it's procedurally harder.
I think what made... I'm used to doing like edge highlighting on I haven't got anything in here to... No. So I'm used to doing edge highlighting on, say, like tanks and stuff like that, which is easier than on these, where you've got to be laser focused on what direction your light's coming from. On a tank, you go, right, okay, I'm going to do it on, front right to rear left, because it's going across an angle like that. Easy. Yeah. Whereas with like these, I've got like a laser line of where the reflection is. So I've got to do it down the leg, I've got to do it up the helmet, on the visor, and stuff like that, which is a little bit... It's catching yourself not doing it in the wrong place. On mine I did try to keep any high or light spot, like stripe that I had. If there was another armor plate that was kind of like, there's a few on the legs that are
kind of on top of each other, I tried to keep that line running through all of them.
Yes, yeah.
It's almost best to not necessarily run a single straight line, but to run separate lines and offset them slightly.
Yeah.
Because then you separate
about
the armor plates or the pieces of whatever metallic that you're painting in.
And then the main thing that I've been painting, and I've been painting this for a long time actually, is my Mylight Queen from Fallout.
The Big Gribbly.
So Big Gribbly, as it's being called affectionately in our groups. I'm terrified this is going to fall off its base because it's only super glued in 3 places. So this
resin
model.
Don't trust super glue.
So this model, after last month's session, my friend Nick sent over some pictures of his contrast paint stuff.
Yes. Some lizard men.
Yeah, they're really cool. So I'd seen these in person, but I say we're going back probably 2 years at this point. Lockdown's been very long. And if you remember from last month, obviously I was discussing Dana Howell's video where she was talking about contrast paints and using them.
I actually went back to rewatch that video, and it is very cool. Very interesting in a kind of a very different way of using contrast paints. Essentially just treating them as a completely different
wash
medium of applying the pigment. Which
so this model is actually based in not the base, nor the base, but the actual model is completely spray painted green. It's like olive drab green, and it is a black Templar contrast paint over the top. So there's green in the recesses of this, and it made a really nice effect.
Yeah, it does look pretty cool.
I then did a dry brush of grey, and then I sat last night for 4 hours doing brown. So all the little nubbins and welts and teeth all down here, I've done every single one by hand in brown. And did
sometimes it can be therapeutic, sometimes it can be tedious.
I need to go back and perhaps do the base rim a little bit more black, because we're going to have a black base rim. But yeah, I'm really proud of that model.
None of my models this month have a black base rim. I have silver, I have brown, and I have grey. No black. Eventually, someday, I will find a model that is appropriate to put a black base rim on. I haven't found it yet.
Spaceship.
All of my Battlefleet Gothic ships have just the flying base spray painted black, just all black.
Yeah.
I've seen a lot of people do with a toothbrush, just spattering on stars. In white paint.
Cool.
Yeah, that's a nice effect. I do like that one.
So I also did a bit of testing some objective markers. So I bought these off Facebook, and they all came pre-primed, and there was a little bit of the floor was already painted, but all the rest I've done. So the wood and the baseball bat. So the baseball bat I based in yellow, and then did the
yellow. Interesting.
Snakebite leather contrast paint over the top, and the crate is a dark brown. I think it was.
I wonder if, because a lot of the time, the wood grain, the actual the line in the wood grain it's not a dark brown. It is actually very nearly black. So I wonder if doing a black panel lining in each of the lines of the wood grain, assuming it's sculpted, and then putting the brown contrast paint over the top. That would be an interesting experiment to see if that looks good.
I think that sort of shows the difference between the base layers with the contrast paint over the top. I touched on it briefly last month. I'm really liking this over the top of brown because it just adds a lot of variation to make it look like wood.
Yeah. Wood is a very inconsistent surface, and you can spend ages and ages and ages painting all of that in, but contrast paint does it all for you.
There's lots of that one's probably a good one from the side. You can see, look, more like the darker bits. It just looks more natural with a lot less work.
Yeah.
These are nowhere near done.
I've definitely come around to the idea that contrast paints for wood is a very good idea.
I do like that. Well, it's interesting because I say I only own 4 contrast paints, and you can tell which ones I use because of there's like very little in some of them, and then the other ones are still like brand new because it's just
that's the one that you've knocked over, obviously.
No, that was the one I did all of that terrain with. You know, I bought the 3rd edition little corner terrain.
Oh yes.
When I first decided to test the contrast paints, and I primed it all white and then went over it all with just that. That was that, and then I've got this Apothecary White, which I was recommended to use for the Sisters of Battle hair. But it's kind of like a bluey green in the recess, and I'm not sure.
I have painted a couple of Sister of Battle heads, the hair on the heads, with a similar blue, but then layering up to white for the highlights. So I can't remember which blue I'm using. It's one of the P3s, I think.
See, all of mine, I've just done them pretty much bright white. Just so as we've said many times before, when you're painting something white, you don't actually use pure white. You use an off-colour one or the other. But
yeah,
on the Sisters of Battle models, I deliberately used bright white.
A stylistic choice. Now, which comes to an important part of artwork, is that there's all these rules that we put in place, like never paint pure black as pure black, never paint white as pure white. But all of these rules, there are always cases where there is a stylistic choice to go and do something else, or to break the rules, to deliberately paint in that certain way. I actually did it myself a couple of months back. I had this idea that I never wanted to highlight into white, because you desaturate the colour. You don't just make the colour lighter, you're desaturating it as well. But actually sometimes you want to desaturate it, because under harsh light then that would look desaturated, and so highlighting into white makes sense for that. The example there just happens to be white as well. Shading into black as well is the same kind of thing.
Did you happen to see the trying to think who did it, might have been Midwinter, where they bought that blackest black paint? It was like 99% black, and they painted the mini up and you just can't see anything. All the details gone.
Is that the one at the end of the video? They're like, this is the detail of the model, and here is us turning off all of the lights in the room that we've had to shine onto this just to get this much detail.
Yeah.
And then it was just nothing left. Yeah.
So the point being, really, if you use pure black, you're going to lose a lot of detail because people just can't see it.
Well, this is why I prime in grey. I know there's a lot of people who say that you should never prime in grey, but absolutely you prime in grey, because when you prime in grey, you can see everything.
I prefer to prime in black. Prime in black most of the time, I must admit. I deviate because I've got some brown which I use for wood, just because I just do that and chuck that contrast paint over the top. Job done. I've got some greens. These are all army painter sprays. There's a purple I got, which was just in the first lockdown when I couldn't get any other primer. But it doesn't really match my my Space Marine sort of purple.
Space Marine purple, yeah.
so it really did me a disservice more than anything. I suppose if we look at the tent I'm building, so this is primed in grey. I don't know why I didn't prime it in white, because it's going to be painted white. Yeah, so this again is from my Fallout tabletop build. So I built this using cocktail sticks and kebab skewers. I glued them together, and then the bottom half is kitchen roll soaked in watered down PVA, and the top is tissues, like blow your nose with tissues, just because they haven't got any texture on them, which was a bit easier to cover it with paint.
I have found, and you'll have to look at yours and see if this is true or not, but I've found that any of the kitchen roll or stuff like that has texture pressed into it, once you soak it in PVA glue and water, that texture goes away.
No, you can still see some wee bits.
Can you still see it on here? Okay.
Yeah,
that's interesting.
It's not a showstopper, but you can still see wee bits. But the top, I'd say I used, nose tissues.
Because every time I've done similar things a few times with kitchen paper specifically, and I've always had the case that it just soaking it in water obliterates the pressed in texture.
I suppose I could iron it if I was, but I'm not too fussed. Yeah, I think I'd just use if I did it again, I'd just use the face tissues, because it's just got a pattern down the edges. So all I did was just cut the edges off before I put it in the.
That does make it easier, so that you don't have to go hunting and checking for stuff.
But yeah, so that's my tent for Novak. It's going to have tables that are just breeze blocks with wood. So I resin printed some little breeze blocks. So they're pretty cool. Incidentally, for the petrol station, I resin printed some little skeletons. I think they're Foscave ones. I think it is. So I'm going to have a little skeleton on the roof, with something like a little deck chair that I printed, and just make a bit of a scene where the guy was like, his last haul up was on the roof. So he's got a little chair, and maybe give him a gun. So I printed up some of the sniper rifles I showed last time. So I could just have that next to his body,
he was up there shooting at passers-by, and someone shot back.
Yeah.
And no one ever went to look through his pockets.
Yeah, exactly.
So our other topic for today is tie-in books when it comes to models. Somewhat famously, I keep going on about it and won't shut up about it recently. The Gaunt's Ghost models that I've been making are based on a book series, but also the Volpone. The reason why I painted this specifically now, not only is it a character from the Gaunt's Ghost series, but there is a new book that's been announced recently about the Volpone specifically. It's actually written by a different author, someone I haven't read, so it would be interesting to see that.
So how much of were they just like a pass-in reference? It's just that they, for the story purposes, they needed a different detachment, so you didn't get a lot of details.
Sometimes when they're involved, it is just a case of, there's another Imperial Guard regiment and they happen to be the Volpone. But they are in different books. They do have involvement in the story.
A bit more fluff, yeah.
There is a very, very famous scene or sequence in one of the books where one of the junior officers in the Volpone goes to, I believe it was Colonel. I think it was Colonel Sturm of the Volpone 50th, the Blue Bloods. And the junior officer says, here's the field report. We have seen that the Tanith First and Only are withdrawing over this particular hillside. And they talk about some other things. And at the end of the conversation, the colonel says, order the artillery, I think it's the Kezok artillery, one of the other regiments, send orders for them to shell the hillside. The junior officer's like, hang on a minute, I just said... No, you just gave me information that there are dangerous enemy factions moving across that hillside. We better shell it immediately. And a little while later, there's a quote from Gaunt that they refer to the phenomenon as friendly fire. But let me tell you, when you're in the target zone with nothing but twigs and bracken for cover, it is anything but friendly. And other such scenes. There is another scene that I shan't spoil that is excellent, involving some wounded Volpone that get rescued by the Tanith First and Only. That sort of puts the rivalry between them kind of in the past. And finally, the Volpone respect the Tanith as the Tanith deserve.
Is the blue and purple colour scheme, was that established or did you just pick that?
So I painted this model based on these colours from the cover art of the Volpone book. Now that book is not out.
Okay.
Yes, that book is not out yet. I have not read it. On the cover of that book, there are 3 Volpone Blue Bloods standing around in their armour. And I noticed that the armour is very, very similar to Cadian, the standard Cadian armour, the same as the models I have. So what I could do, and what I have done, is just paint a standard Cadian as in those colours. I'm pretty sure that the one at the back of the cover art is in Scion armour, rather than the standard infantry armour. I haven't really had a close look at the Scion armour set, so I'm not 100%, but there's a lot more fancy gold around the edges of that one.
No purity seals though.
No purity seals. They're not Space Marines. Dirty, filthy Imperial Guard don't deserve purity seals. I can't remember who this was. It might have been Leotin, actually, in one of his 3-hour-long videos talking about particular subjects. But there was this kind of offhand remark about Imperial Guard soldiers finding a back alley preacher to make them an unofficial purity seal.
Yeah, is that the one where they were saying that they would I'd be accused of stealing it or shot for having a fake one or something?
Yeah, it sounds about right.
I have listened to this. Yeah.
Speaking of being shot for carrying illegal substances, shall we talk about the Ordo Redactus?
I'm sorry, did we take illegal drugs last month? When was that?
I haven't ever taken illegal drugs.
You should have been caught carrying them.
We're talking, of course, about illegal knowledge, and any knowledge that is illegal is therefore wrong, and so we are talking about the wrong information from last month that has been corrected in the Ordo Redactus. So, given that you have the list handy, would you like to read off the messages from the Ordo Redactus, and we shall discuss them one by one?
Let me get my device of communication. So, Ordo Redactus this month pointed out that when we showed Ed's frightful blackwash spell last month, that we had in fact done a little bit naughty with our editing and faked it.
The point of the picture was that I knocked over the blackwash and it was not a problem because it was in a dropper bottle with a lid. Because I don't buy Games Workshop products that if you knock them over, they spill everywhere. That's the joke.
It's a little 3D printed stand for mine. Look at that. Look. Yeah.
Or you could just have a bottle that's not going to spill if you knock it over.
So the Fallout 4 sniper rifles, they pointed out, are just modified hunting rifles, which is in Wasteland Warfare. So basically, as I was saying, there's no actual points for a sniper rifle in Wasteland Warfare. In the actual computer game, you can modify a hunting rifle into a sniper rifle, which is a bit in my mind because it's actually a completely different gun when you modify it at the end result. But it's a computer game.
I'm going to modify this Remington M700, and oh look, an Accuracy International. That was a great modification.
But you could change the caliber as well from like .38 to like 50 cal and stuff like that. It's just,
It's a computer game. Weirdness happens in computer games. if everything in computer games was perfectly realistic, they wouldn't be good games. It is something that I've come to the conclusion of.
The highly philosophical question that we asked was, how long's a piece of string?
How big is an Imperial Guard regiment? How long is a piece of string is what I said.
So we have an answer that is actually, factually, the best kind of correct.
It is technically correct, the best type of correct.
So the answer is a piece of string is twice the length from the middle to the end, which is very true.
It is, in fact, technically correct.
Yeah. They also pointed out our mutual friend Nick's. When I was trying to remember the models, they were lizard men, as we've already mentioned them and shown up on screen already by now.
To make sure that they can copyright them, I think they're called Seraphim now.
Yeah, there would be something copyrightable, wouldn't they?
But they're lizard men. But yes, we've already shown that, so next.
Depressingly, we mentioned the film Disney's Cars when we were talking about painting up some of the... Well, you were talking about painting up the models.
Yes,
apparently
I have a few of them as my Mad Max cars, yes.
That film was released in 2006, which is incredible.
That is 15 years ago.
That is, yeah. And there's 2 sequels. So apparently there was Cars 2, which I've never heard of, and then there was Planes, which I have heard of, but I haven't seen. I've seen most of Cars. I watched it one Christmas.
I haven't seen any of these films. I literally just bought the toys because they were 1:43 scale. It actually said on the packaging, on online listings, it says in the description that they're 1:43 scale. And I was testing 1:50, 1:43, 1:48 scale stuff as well. And I have actually changed my mind. Previously, I have said that 1:48 is the better scale. I think 1:43 is better for 28mm models.
If anyone's interested, in last month's episode, we showed where I bought a 1:43 and a 1:52. Was it a car and lorry?
35.
Refer back to last month's video. I basically bought the 2 closest, the 32mm, painted them both up, and we concluded to 1:43 was the better match, at least in our eyes. But feel free to make up your own mind and have a quick look at that.
The difficulty with 1:43 scale is that it's not actually all that common, unfortunately.
No. It's trying to find some is...
Yeah, there's a few bits here and there, but there's no like big companies making a lot of stuff in 1:43 scale, so finding it can be difficult.
For my purposes, for the Fallout game, it's even harder because I want to find stuff that's sort of 1950s American as well, so it's even smaller.
Specific things. What the most common stuff, and here's a good piece of advice for this month. The most common stuff I found in 1:43 scale is slot car racing. So I think I mentioned this previously. Slot cars are like Scalextrics. They've got a little tab that fits in a slot with electric runners, and it will follow the slot. There's lots of companies, so it's just generically called slot car, and there is a fair amount of them that are 1:43 scale.
Yeah,
it's not the most.
We mentioned previously.
It's not the most common.
They kind of some of the models go up and down to fit the.
Yeah,
but
the kind of Formula One cars aren't necessarily the type of thing that you would expect to see in a war game. Hey, it's a nice thing to make a diorama, maybe. But the rally cars, which if you repaint them and do some work to, they sort of just look like normal civilian cars, because a lot of the time rally cars, the actual bodywork is just a normal kind of everyday car. It's like the insides get modded to heck and back, but the shell isn't.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Side note: when I was a kid, my Scalextrics, it didn't come with wing mirrors for my rally cars, and my dad refused to take it back to the shop, so I never had any wing mirrors on my rally cars.
And now you could 3D print those wing mirrors.
Could. I still have that Scalextrics, in fact. Got 2. Now, they mention here the...
Back to the Autorelaxers messages.
So, Dunwich, which is the town that Cthulhu is set. So the Kickstarter that I backed, where I'm getting some models of a seaside town that I was mentioning I was going to use for Fallout. I didn't remember the town from the Cthulhu game, so it's called Dunwich. It appears in the Fallout games as a reference to Lovecraftian horror, so that there's little nods at the head, but I couldn't. That was the name of the town I'd forgot. As an aside, there is a village in Suffolk also called Dunwich. The Autorelaxers have been unable to confirm if the population are afflicted with their own horror. So, sounds like a road trip when we get a lockdown.
I think, given the weirdness of English place names, I think it'd be Dunwich.
Yeah.
I think the pronunciation would be Dunwich, but then British place names are weird when it comes to pronunciation, so that might also not be correct.
Yeah, so swinging back round to Henry, my cat. Apparently, last month he had 6 particularly good appearances, and they were.
I remember when editing, there were a few good ones that I kind of zoomed in on. I didn't pick out all of them. I don't remember there being 6, but apparently 6 good appearances. So. Yeah. That's
They're going to be disappointed.
I don't think Henry's been around today
because he hasn't turned up at all. Well, he walked past at one point, but he's not been in shot today, so we'll be very disappointed.
That's disappointing. Oh well.
And then at the very end, they wanted to make a statement that Ed's saying that they pick everything apart that you say. That in fact they do that because that's their job.
That is in fact why we don't pay them, because we don't pay them. I mean, I don't get paid for this. Do you get paid for this? When do we get paid for this?
And Foxy Mitson, obviously, as I mentioned previously, suggested she was going to knit a graveyard, complete with tombstones and zombies, faster than the rate that us two would finish the models.
Well, as I mentioned, I'm going to finish the Stomper, the Back to the Brush Stomper. I'm going to get that finished first, at least to the first stage of completion. I mentioned that I'm going to... What's there, I'm going to paint it, glue it together and call it done, and then I'm going to come back to it later and like modify like the shoulder pad, I want to put a belly gun in and stuff like that, but that's a separate project. But I want to get it to the first point of being done, and then I will go and do the graveyard, because I have some ideas. I had some ideas, and I have some more ideas of how to make some very interesting stuff there. So yes, I do want to get back to that.
Mine is literally by my feet. Looking at this side, because you can't see the other side. So it's primed. I did some test painting on this, which is...
Yeah, so you are definitely ahead of me. I have done some modelling work, and I've primed all of it. But I want to scratch build a few small minor details to go along with it. So technically it's not all built, but all of the original stuff from the kit is built and primed. That's as far as I've got. I've put no further paint on it. Eventually, someday, in a couple of years, in a decade or two,
I haven't primed walls, it would appear.
It will be in advance of the heat death of the universe, probably.
Hopefully, yeah.
But I will, at some point, get that done.
Oh dear!
And that will double the amount of terrain I have.
My cats have been at this bit, sadly. We've lost bits of her. She's supposed to have a halo. Well, I can see the halo here in the box.
Well, it's an old broken statue.
It'll super glue. The joys of pet ownership. But if we ever need a giant fluffy Xenos for one of the games, I've got 6. I mean, it's never happened yet, but at some point...
There are rules. I can't remember what game system it was, but there used to be back in the 90s. There was a game system that had rules, and it was all written in universe, from an in universe perspective, that a giant fluffy alien would bound across the field, and any model that was knocked over was just removed as a casualty. Like in the game. I can't remember where that's from. I don't think it was Rogue Trader. I don't think it was the old... I know, it definitely wasn't the old Necromunda. I'm not sure. I don't think it was Games Workshop game. I think it was a different company's game. I may have to see if I can find that. Because that's definitely a funny thing from the annals of tabletop wargaming history.
I think that's everything.
And so I think we can put another nail in another part of wargaming history by wrapping up today's episode.
Yeah, certainly. So
again, on our Instagram page, there'll be some nicer pictures of the stuff we've been talking about today. And there'll be a link in the description for that.
You've been watching Back to the Brush. I'd like to thank everyone once again for coming with us and watching. And if you'd like to leave any comments, please do so in the comment section below, or on the Instagram if you want to, on the individual images.
I'm Edgar.
And I'm Paul Allen.
And we'll see you next time when we get Back to the Brush. I've been Edgar. I can't even say it now. Stop laughing.
My computer is overheating because someone left bits of newspaper, bits of paper towel covered in paint on top of the fans.
I usually put mine in the bin when I'm done with them.
I'll use that for a week and then stingy with me paper towels. Anyway.